Ed Stafford, who often starves 9 meals in 3 days, is absolutely thrilled this time. Surviving in the swamp, he unexpectedly obtains a lump of wild protein glowing green. The chewy texture instantly gives him a pain face. Midway, he hits a stroke of luck and catches a small fish. Good ingredients still require no extra seasoning. Then, with a beaming smile, he enjoys this nutritious feast. Afterward, he wraps it up with some post-meal fruit to cut the grease, munching piece by piece with a satisfying crunch. Its vitamin content easily surpasses beef by hundreds of times. In this episode, Ed Stafford challenges Aldo, a former Royal Marines commando. The battleground is set in the mangrove swamps of Kalimantan Island. The environment here is not only harsh, but also teeming with wild crocodiles lurking in the waters. Aldo, as a retired Special Forces soldier, has physical abilities that are undeniably top tier among humans. Hearing there's a bald survivalist who's outrageously audacious, he rushes over overnight to teach Ed Stafford a proper lesson. Since Ed Stafford once failed the Marines selection, he holds a grudge and is determined to wipe the floor with Aldo. This survival route is again designed by the veteran Woody. Both will start simultaneously from the river, first traversing crocodile-infested mangrove swamps, then entering the jungle to reach a watchtower 100 kilometers away. The first to arrive wins. Their only equipment is a survival knife, and, as usual, not a single strand of hair is brought. Escorted by the crew, the two quickly arrive at the starting point and eagerly embark on this starvation journey. The cameraman follows closely behind, hauling gear. The underwater mud makes walking extremely strenuous. Upon finally entering the mangroves, Aldo nearly faceplants right away. The tangled roots also leave Ed Stafford struggling to move, and midway, he treats everyone to a classic faceplant into mud performance, making intimate contact with the foul sludge. He then gets up, cursing, and continues forward. Aldo isn't faring much better. The narrow river ahead has him scowling, especially with crocodiles in the water, ready to strike any time. After some thought, he decides to use vines and fallen logs to inch forward, but barely 2 steps in, the log beneath him teaches him a harsh lesson, and he predictably takes a plunge. Terrified, he scrambles back to shore. The thought of crocodiles ambushing him in the water leaves him shaken. Ed Stafford faces the same dilemma. Coincidentally, a fallen tree spans the water ahead, so without hesitation, he starts climbing across. Unlike Aldo, who nearly became crocodile food, Ed Stafford successfully reaches the opposite bank. With the tide rising rapidly, and less than an hour until dark, Ed Stafford begins scouting for a campsite. Meanwhile, Aldo also preps for the night. He plans to fashion a simple single-person bed by laying branches across a tree trunk. Luckily, his petite frame requires minimal materials. Once done, lying on it feels absolutely authentic. As for Ed Stafford, he settles for a tree fork as a makeshift bed. To avoid rolling off mid-sleep and becoming crocodile chow, he even ties himself to the trunk with his belt. The next morning, Ed Stafford wakes up early. At dawn, both hurry to resume their journey. Soon after, Ed Stafford gets a stroke of luck. He spots an unidentified seashell on the ground. Such free protein isn't something he'd pass up. Poisonous or not, eating it will tell, he figures. Prying it open, he's stunned to find the meat inside glowing green. A quick sniff confirms its protein content must far exceed beef's. Without hesitation, he pops it into his mouth for a taste. After this simple breakfast, Ed Stafford marches on. As they ventured deeper into the swamp, the tangled tree roots beneath their feet grew denser. At that moment, not far ahead, a large tree unnatural for the swamp appeared. Ed Stafford immediately headed toward it. Sure enough, he soon discovered new territory. Realizing he could finally escape this damned mangrove forest, Ed Stafford's face instantly lit up with joy. However, before his excitement could last, the seawater flooding the surroundings left him stunned. Turns out, this was just a small island all along. The realization shattered his morale, leaving him questioning his life choices. Meanwhile, Aldo was pushing forward at full speed. When encountering a river, he pulled off a monkey climb effortlessly. Thanks to his exceptional upper body strength, he crossed to the opposite bank in no time. As for Ed Stafford, he remained stranded on the island, gloomily watching ants march by. After berating himself thoroughly, he finally regained his composure and started gathering vines on the island. To defeat Aldo, he needed to play to his strengths. After collecting several bundles, he was ready to leave. Elsewhere, Aldo, focused on his march, ran into trouble again. To cross the main river ahead, he decided to fell a large tree. After chopping most of the way through, he tried pushing it down, only for the tree to twist mid-fall, infuriating him. Briefly reconsidering, he still chose to risk it. Yet within 2 steps, he lost balance and tumbled down. sparks flying as he hastily retreated from the danger zone. Unlike the unlucky Aldo, Ed Stafford refused to recklessly force his way across. With the tide rising fast, he pulled out his vines and began setting up camp. First, he tied vines between two large trees, then reinforced them with wooden rods to easily support a person's weight. Repeating the process, he crafted a makeshift hammock. For added stability, he secured the intersections. Once done, he scooped up mud from the shore and shaped it into a fire platform on the hammock. Just as Ed Stafford prepped for fire making, a small head abruptly surfaced in the water nearby, silently observing. The sight terrified the cameraman, who scrambled onto Ed Stafford's hammock in seconds. The priority now was starting a fire. Using a shoelace-powered hand drill, he worked furiously until embers appeared, then transferred them into a tinder nest. Soon, flames burst to life with the help of manual fanning. The thought of no longer enduring mosquito bites at night made Ed Stafford grin like a gleeful 40-year-old kid. That night, too restless to sleep, he could only pray that no crocodile would leap up to ambush his backside. Day 3 arrived. After a sleepless, nerve-wracking night, dawn finally broke. Without even breakfast, he set off toward his destination. Meanwhile, Aldo, having starved 7 or 8 meals in 3 days, finally hit his limit. He decided to scavenge for protein, to refuel before continuing. Gathering branches, he fashioned a crab trap, weaving it together with bark no bait needed, relying purely on luck. Now, he'd only need to check every 10 minutes. Ed Stafford, meanwhile, marched ahead with renewed vigor. Soon, another body of water blocked his path. Unwilling to risk wading through, he brainstormed and opted to pole vault across using branches. Applying the Pythagorean theorem, triangles equals stability, he quickly built a triangular frame, then eagerly climbed onto it. Using vines to pull the frame forward, he inched toward the opposite bank, only for the inevitable mishap to strike. Life's unpredictable, he mused, like sausage wrapped in intestine. Though his method was crude, he somehow made it across unscathed. After reorienting himself, he pressed on. Meanwhile, Aldo was still at camp checking his crab trap. Lifting it up surprise, he actually caught an unlucky one. Without hesitation, he sent it to the afterlife with a stick. With no campfire, he had no choice but to eat it raw. The flesh was pale and tender, with a sticky, slippery texture. Its calorie content would make even cows weep. Wolfing it down, he immediately set off again. As evening approached, after a full day of crawling through the swamp, Ed Stafford was exhausted and starving, his kidneys screaming. Watching fish dart through the water, he nearly drooled with hunger, so he hacked off a branch to craft an automatic fishing contraption. We're crafting too. Then, using a leech as bait, he set the trap, only to nearly end his survival journey right there. Good grief, the bad luck hit him like a truck. Luckily, his fate was strong enough, and he escaped unscathed. Carefully resetting the trap, he knew he'd feast by nightfall if all went well. Sure enough, before dark, another unlucky victim took the bait. After starving 8 meals in 3 days, he finally got his second proper meal. Ed Stafford couldn't help but grin. Little did he know, his rival Aldo was watching from across the river. Aldo decided to shadow Ed Stafford's sneaky tactics. As the sun set, Ed Stafford picked a prime spot to light the stove. Moments later, he relished his nutritious feast. One bite in, the flavor and texture were leagues better than that glowing mystery snail. Watching from the shadows, Aldo gulped audibly. In no time, Ed Stafford devoured every last scrap of fish. Day 4 arrived. Ed Stafford set out early. Once he was gone, Aldo crept toward the campsite. Adopting a take-what-you-find mentality, he pocketed some leftover charcoal from the ashes. Though Ed Stafford had a temporary lead, Aldo remained convinced he was survival's golden boy. Later, Aldo hit another river blockade. Learning from past failures, he planned to vine rope his way across. Climbing a tree, he hooked a branch onto roots on the opposite bank. With his monstrous biceps, he swung over successfully. Nightfall came. Ed Stafford swiftly built a shelter from palm fronds. Admiring his handiwork, his grin widened like a proud ant. Aldo, meanwhile, attempted to start a fire with the stolen charcoal. Wrapping dry tinder around it, he pressed down and rubbed furiously for 2.5 minutes, generating sparks through friction. Another hungry night passed for both. Next morning, Ed Stafford plucked a palm fruit for breakfast. Bite after bite, it was refreshingly sweet, spicy and savory. Aldo, on the other hand, ate palm heart instead, equally refreshing, spicy and savory. After breakfast, both entered the final sprint. With less than 10 kilometers to the finish, their progress was neck and neck. Now, it came down to navigation skills and sheer endurance. Pushing forward relentlessly, Ed Stafford finally spotted the watchtower. At the same time, Aldo was sprinting full throttle. With a triumphant laugh, Ed Stafford reached the tower first, only to climb up and find Aldo already waiting at the top. No doubt about it, Aldo won this round. The challenge concluded with Ed Stafford's grudging respect. Ed Stafford really hit the jackpot this time. Surviving in the desert, he actually caught an extra-large groundhog. Look at this appetite-worthy smoked jerky. Taking a bite, the chewiness is incredible, with oil bursting in his mouth. What was supposed to be a survival show has turned into a bite of the wild. This episode, Ed Stafford ventures into the heart of Mongolia's desert region. His challenger this time is Matt, hailed as the child of nature. Not only does Matt possess extensive wilderness survival and hunting skills, but he's also a former ultramarathoner who spends 365 days a year living outdoors, never returning home. The survival route for this episode is once again designed by Woody. Both men will start simultaneously from a 3,000-meter-high mountain peak. The 100-kilometer race will take them through grasslands and scorching dry deserts. The first to reach the salt flats at the finish line will be crowned the ultimate survival king. Riding the production team's budget four-wheeler, they arrive at the starting point in a flash. Then, both immediately hit the gas and rush forward. Unexpectedly, dark clouds gather in the sky, and soon, heavy rain pours down. The sudden strong wind nearly messes up Ed Stafford's hair. Encountering rain at such high altitude, with temperatures near freezing, hypothermia becomes a real risk, so he must descend before nightfall. Matt quickly pulls out a rag from his bag and drapes it over himself. After briefly surveying the terrain, he also sprints downhill. Meanwhile, Ed Stafford faces terrible trail conditions. The loose gravel underfoot looks dangerous, and actually is. Mid-step, his foot suddenly slips, sending him crashing down in confusion. Getting up, he realizes he nearly fell off a cliff and met an untimely end. So he detours around cautiously. Eventually, he makes it safely to the base. By then, Matt has also descended successfully. Spotting a clear stream, he chugs water without hesitation. With storm clouds thickening, building shelter becomes urgent. Matt quickly gathers enough deadwood, finds a prime spot, and sets up camp. After framing the lean-to, he covers the roof with spruce branches. Hungry? He snacks on leaves for vitamins. Finally, he starts friction, fire making, to avoid freezing overnight. Ed Stafford, however, prioritizes differently. He decides to gather supplies first, to prepare for worsening conditions. A circling vulture catches his attention. Drawing from his 2.5 years of survival experience, he deduces rodents must live up there. For quick protein, he climbs back up to investigate. Sure enough, he finds a burrow, with animal droppings inside. Ed Stafford plots an ambush. Digging up a tree root, he crafts a snare, blocks auxiliary entrances with rocks, and sets the trap at the main exit. Now, it's a waiting game. As night falls, Ed Stafford settles into a ready-made hillside cave, sleeping soundly through day 1. Dawn breaks on day 2. Ed Stafford checks his trap early, only to find it empty. No meat means just water for breakfast. If he fails to find food today, starvation looms in coming days. Refusing to accept defeat, he locates another burrow, blocks all but one entrance, and sets a snare. Now, it's secured and ready. Unlike Ed Stafford's sneaky tactics, Matt crafted several spears and decided to hunt while traveling. To avoid dehydration mid-journey, he specifically hacked off a large chunk of ice to take with him. Then, climbing to a vantage point, he surveyed the terrain. Facing the endless grassland, a confident Matt resolved to march until the ice ran out. As time passed, Ed Stafford finally got some good news. His snare had caught an unlucky critter. Without hesitation, he knocked it out with a stick. Pulling it out, good grief, it was a massive groundhog. Barely containing his grin, he hauled it back to camp. Meanwhile, after an afternoon of sprinting, Matt had surged far ahead in progress. The downside? His ice was nearly gone. Left with no choice, he headed toward nearby foothills for fresh water. Back to Ed Stafford. This guy was now living his best life. After a quick celebratory dance, he whipped out his survival knife and got to butchering. The haul, 4 kilograms of meat, plus the hide, repurposed as a water pouch. He eagerly roasted some for a snack, sliced the rest into strips, and built a smoking rack with branches to preserve the surplus. Finally, he covered it with foliage to boost smoke efficiency. By dusk, Matt reached the foothills. Though water remained elusive, the area teemed with protein. Never one to miss an opportunity, Matt grabbed his spear and got to work. Expecting an easy feast, he threw strike after strike. All misses. Looks like another hungry night. Resigned, he started prepping camp. Dug a modest pit, lined it with pebbles, piled dry dung atop and lit it, then buried the heated stones with soil. Sitting on this seat, pure bliss. Ed Stafford, as usual, slept under the stars, passing out instantly. Day 3 arrived. Overnight smoking had cured the meat perfectly. Breakfast? Naturally, the jerky. Each bite was crispy outside, tender inside, and gloriously chewy. After packing all the meat, he headed to a stream, filling his potato skin pouch which, to his delight, doubled as a nipple-sealed canteen. Now, fully prepared, he set off. Matt, too, packed up. His priority today, finding water. For him, a week without food was manageable, but 2 days without water meant game over. Luckily, he soon spotted hope. A lusher green patch ahead signaled a river. Though detouring meant extra miles, desperation left no room for hesitation. Ed Stafford, perhaps feeling his age, exhausted quickly. To conserve energy, he built a branch drag sled. After diligent work, it was ready. He even loaded firewood onto it. As expected, walking became effortless. Matt, after his detour, finally reached the river. He gulped water greedily, instantly rejuvenated. Nearby willows inspired him. To carry water, he fashioned a Jenny Shui Hu, simple canteen, split a branch lengthwise, hollowed out the center, sealed it with tree sap, pressure tested it by blowing, and wrapped it in bark. Voila, a natural canteen. Small capacity, but otherwise flawless. Night fell again. After a full day's trek, Ed Stafford was spent. He picked a random spot and collapsed asleep. Next morning, Ed Stafford rose early and marched on. As they gradually approached the desert area, the temperature became increasingly extreme. The scorching, arid environment nearly broke Ed Stafford. The next second, he was sucking water through the built-in nipple of his canteen. This drinking method not only prevented waste, but also allowed precise control of water intake. A few sips of this milk tea later, he felt utterly satisfied. Refreshed, he stepped on the gas and continued forward. According to the map, though Matt had detoured for water, he still maintained his lead. Unsurprising for a man who could march 50 kilometers daily without food for 4 days. Spotting ancient hunting petroglyphs on rocks, he felt inspired to hunt for some protein. Confidently wielding his handmade spear in the grasslands, drawing from past failures, he effortlessly skewered a rat. This move was something Ed Stafford could probably never master. In his excitement, he even performed last rites for the abruptly deceased rodent. Then, immediately pulling out his hand drill, he started a fire to roast it. After minimal processing, he charred it directly over flames. First, a roasted kidney as an appetizer, tossed into his mouth and chewed noisily. This single bite packed the nutrition of 1.25 kilograms beef. Each mouthful rivaled gourmet dishes at Michelin-starred restaurants. Starving, he even gnawed the bones clean. Energized, he packed up and sprinted toward his target. Meanwhile, Ed Stafford entered the desert, only to find his water pouch nearly empty. Now he was truly screwed. After trudging hundreds of meters under blistering sun, his frustration boiled over. In such extreme heat, without hydration, heatstroke loomed. Luckily, heaven favors the bald. He noticed oddly discolored sand ahead. Approaching, sure enough, it was damp. Without hesitation, he started digging. When mineral-rich water gushed out, Ed Stafford's grin returned. After crude filtration using his hat, he drank directly. One tentative sip, and he burst into laughter again. Calming down, he filled his groundhog skin pouch to the brim. To avoid exhausting hill climbs, Ed Stafford opted to traverse ridge lines, but reaching the summit, he faced gale force winds. Had he not been aerodynamically bald, he might have been blown away. Prioritizing survival, he abandoned the plan and descended. Compared to Ed Stafford's snail pace, Matt was a perpetual motion machine, advancing non-stop. What was meant to be a survival challenge had turned into an ultramarathon. A desert oasis appeared ahead. Matt decided to camp there. Action followed thought. He dug a pit, lined it with gathered dry grass. As a mattress, honestly, even I'd nap in that cozy nest. Meanwhile, Ed Stafford spotted distant firelight. Matt's camp. Seeing a chance to overtake, he suppressed giggles as he sneaked past, only celebrating once safely distant. Day 5 arrived. After an early march, Ed Stafford had surpassed Matt and glimpsed the salt-flat finish line. The final sprint began. Matt, after draining his last drop, ditched his canteen and bolted forward. Ed Stafford raced like an Olympian, with the cameraman struggling to keep up. As Ed Stafford reached the finish, grinning, victory seemed certain, until he saw Matt already waiting. Absolutely unreal. Despite last night's lead, he'd still lost. Ed Stafford stood stunned by Matt's speed. The challenge concluded with his awed respect. This time, Ed Stafford, who starves 9 meals in 3 days, was so desperate for food that he wouldn't even spare ants. He happily munched on them, only for his stomach to start churning violently that night. What followed was an epic vomiting spectacle. Is not of different. Truly, life is unpredictable. After dozens of episodes of Duel in the Wild, Ed Stafford's passive starvation endurance skill has become utterly unmatched. To take his survival expertise to the next level, he decided to challenge hunger specialists worldwide. This episode's battleground is set in northern Thailand's jungles. The first challenger is E.J. Snyder, A.J., a retired Special Forces veteran who served in the Gulf War. As a fellow hairless survival expert, his capabilities speak for themselves. Woody designed the survival route as usual. Both men would start from opposite sides of a valley, racing downstream to reach a dam 60 kilometers away. Whoever arrives first wins. Unlike previous challenges, they carried not just survival knives, but also had camera crews documenting their journey. Riding the production team's four-wheelers, they reached their respective starting points and immediately began their frantic race. Both shared the same strategy. Following the river would ensure faster progress. Seeing the steep hillside, Ed Stafford decided to show off for the camera crew. He tore a vine from a tree, tied one end to a trunk, and slowly descended holding the other end, only to realize midway the vine was too short. As he tried using a stick to continue descending, his footing suddenly slipped. No time to explain. Active area off. He went sliding down in a shower of sparks and noise, leaving the cameraman dumbfounded. Fortunately, Ed Stafford's luck held strong, just some minor arm scrapes. Meanwhile, Snyder faced similar terrain challenges. Considering that sliding down directly might result in his funeral arrangements, he cut a bamboo segment to craft a makeshift handbrake. While rough on the rear end, this was clearly superior to Ed Stafford's prostate braking method. Shortly after, Snyder spotted a banana tree. Without hesitation, he drank from its sap to moisten his lips, taking extra sections for later. Meanwhile, Ed Stafford entered beast mode, regardless of the cameraman's ability to keep up. After arduous trekking, he finally spotted the river, only to face a 60-meter cliff. Remembering his family responsibilities, he wisely chose to detour. Snyder, however, got lucky again, discovering an animal trail, nature's equivalent of a jungle highway. He soon reached the riverside first. Day 2 arrived. Still detouring, Ed Stafford grew increasingly anxious, picking up his pace. He finally reached the river. To avoid diarrhea from drinking untreated water, he unusually decided to dig a filtration pit. Without waiting for sedimentation, he drank directly. 2 gulps later, his face lit up with joy. Knowing his opponent might be ahead, he immediately continued without rest. To accelerate progress, he reluctantly chose to float downstream, nearly dying upon entry. Thankfully, his aerodynamic baldness reduced drag, saving his life. Ashore, he decided to build a raft, using banana trees. With his survival knife, he quickly felled the trees. Hugging 2 banana trunks, he floated downstream, an efficiency boost despite the freezing temperature. After several kilometers, concerned for his health, he wisely returned to land. These unconventional moves gradually closed the gap with Snyder. Meanwhile, Snyder on the other side, lacking the passive starvation endurance skill, after 2 days of arduous trekking, was now utterly famished. Spotting a fallen dead tree along the way, his eyes lit up. Without hesitation, he pulled out his survival knife and hacked at the trunk, hoping to find some high-protein snacks inside. To his dismay, the knife broke before revealing any trace of protein. Grumbling with hunger, he had no choice but to press on. Luckily, soon after, he encountered a snake that clearly didn't check its horoscope. Seizing the opportunity, he swiftly killed the black mamba. With this prize, dinner was secured. Stuffing it laboriously into his pocket, he carried it along, confident in his lead. Thus, he decided to camp early. Simultaneously, Ed Stafford was advancing full throttle. Mid-march, riverbank noises caught his attention. Signaling the cameraman to stay quiet, he peered across. Good grief, it was Snyder making fire. Oblivious to being watched, Snyder focused solely on roasting his snake. This golden chance to overtake wasn't something Ed Stafford would miss. His face involuntarily split into a grin. Then, he and the cameraman sneaked onward, finally leading thanks to his starvation endurance. Ed Stafford's smile widened. With just 10 minutes till nightfall, he settled in some bushes. For the night, Day 3 arrived. Ed Stafford set out at dawn. To widen his lead, while still energetic, he chose to cross the valley as a shortcut, saving hours. His face almost cramped from grinning, until a waterfall blocked his path. Normally, he'd detour without hesitation, but to win, risks had to be taken. Gritting his teeth, he began climbing, only for the inevitable mishap. His footing slipped, sending him crashing down. Dazed from the impact and intimate contact with rocks, he somehow survived, thanks to his indestructible luck. Abandoning this doomed route, he retreated to follow the river. Meanwhile, Snyder, during his trek, stumbled upon a wild cave. Adhering to the always explore caves principle, he entered hunting for protein. Sure enough, bat colonies lined the walls. A few whacks later, dinner was secured again. Pocketing his bounty, he continued, unwittingly taking a shortcut that put him ahead once more. At dusk, Snyder cheerfully picked a prime spot to roast bats. The crispy on the outside, tender inside morsels were spicy and savory, tiny but packed with beef-level energy. In contrast, Ed Stafford survived on water, with energy depleted. After 3 starving days, he targeted an ant nest. Crouching, he vacuumed them up desperately. Though tiny, their numbers sufficed as a stopgap. That night, an ant seemed to pinch his throat. Worse, nausea struck. Violent retching caught him off guard. Likely formic acid poisoning from overindulgence. True to his waste-not philosophy, he repurposed vomit as bait for a mousetrap. Next morning, inspecting the trap revealed a perfectly squashed rodent. Good ingredients need no seasoning. After basic cleaning, he charred it over flames. Soon, aromatic nutrition was ready. Devouring a thigh first, he finally tasted real protein after days. The firm, dense texture made him beam uncontrollably. Each bite was bliss. In no time, Ed Stafford demolished everything, meat and bones alike. After days of intense trekking, both men were visibly exhausted, their paces slowing in unison. Day 5 arrived, now merely 500 to 600 meters apart. With about 10 kilometers to the finish, they launched their final sprint at full throttle. Trailing closely, Snyder spotted Ed Stafford's footprints, realizing he'd fallen behind. To win, he'd need to gamble, chopping wood to build the wilderness victory raft. If it held, he'd float straight to victory. But misfortune struck. The raft disintegrated shortly after launch. Forced ashore, he resumed running. Meanwhile, Ed Stafford sighted the dam. As expected, he reached it first, proving once more he's survival's golden boy. Just as Ed Stafford climbed the dam, Snyder arrived breathlessly behind him. The challenge concluded with Ed Stafford's narrow victory.